Shaf is a really hard act to follow, but inshallah, I'm going to try. So my name is Sahdya. I work in human rights. My work has involved advocating for migrants and refugees, student rights. I lived and worked in Afghanistan and Palestine, and in the latter, I was a human rights observer. For the last 4 years, I've been working, so since 2020, I've been working on tech and society, the three areas looking at educational apps and technologies and their impact on children of color, Black children specifically, working on looking at how technology is being used by governments to detain, arrest, and deport migrants. And finally, up until December, on the automation of warfare, so lobbying the UK government to adopt a UN resolution on the regulation of warfare. And please bear with me because I came off a flight in the morning, I'm quite tired, and I've had an Americano, and I'm also a bit shaky. Okay, so I'm going to start with a story. In the late 1990s, I visited the Epcot Center in Disneyland, Florida, with my sister, grandfather, aunt, uncle, and cousins. For those of you who don't know what the Epcot Center is, it's a theme park that has rides and attractions that focus on the advancement of technology. It was not the first theme park that I wanted to go to when we arrived in Disneyland, but in true South Asian fashion, we had to go because the trip started with science. So when I was thinking about how to begin and frame my presentation today, the memory of a ride I went on at Epcot came to mind. And it was a slow-moving ride that showed everyone on board that they would be able to see the name of the person that was calling them in the future. And also, if they chose to accept the call, they'd be able to see the person that they were speaking to. And I remember my sister and I being so excited, thinking like, how cool is that? And couldn't wait for that to happen. And the reason I wanted to share that particular story with you is because I think that for most people, when we think about technology, the feelings are of excitement and awe. And not only that, not only is technology seen as exciting, but also seen as a solution, if you like, silver bullet to society's problems. What is being referred to or is referred to as techno-solutionism. But I think, like for all of us here, what we're seeing in Gaza, the unprecedented use of tech to kill, is showing us another side to tech. So both Ukraine, which has been called the first AI war, and Gaza, which has been called the first automated genocide, are showing us how tech is being used increasingly in defense. And I want to go into a bit of detail about the tech being used, but obviously I have 10 minutes, so I can't go into all three systems, but also explain the context in which this use of unprecedented tech is taking place. And also share what you can do as individuals, but also as a community of Muslims. So let's start with context. I don't know how many of you know, but last year in October, a UN resolution was passed that will start discussions this year in the United Nations General Assembly on the regulation of AI in warfare. And this may sound promising to some of you. Having worked for government, I don't see it as very promising, but when it comes to data and tech policy, what we see is that big tech is dominating these discussions and exerting a lot of influence. And it's exerting a huge amount of influence and is showing a complete disregard for human rights, and human rights needs to be at the center of any data and tech policy. And actually, when I woke up this morning, the first thing that I saw on my phone was that the US government has awarded Palantir a $480 billion contract to develop tech for the battlefield. So we're learning more and more how big tech supports Israel's AI-powered genocide and apartheid. And these companies, as I'm sure most of you know, Google, Meta, and Amazon. And you will have heard of Gospel, The Gospel, Lavender, and Where's Daddy? I'm sure all of you have heard of those, right? The Gospel, which identifies buildings and facilities purportedly used by militants, has allowed Israel to increase the pace at which it can produce targets and provided a solution to the Israeli occupation forces' chronic problem of running out of targets to strike. So if I share some facts and figures with you, during Israel's 2014 aggression on Gaza, which lasted 51 days, the IOF struck between 5,000 and 6,000 targets. During the first 35 days of Israel's current aggression on Gaza, 15,000 targets have been attacked. So you can see the difference that the use of AI has made. And the use of AI systems has raised a number of concerns, which civil society groups have been raising in their meetings with government and business, and also has formed a large part of their campaigns. And some of these include digital dehumanization, algorithmic biases, loss of meaningful human control, which we're seeing with the development of autonomous weapon systems, lack of human judgment and understanding, lack of accountability, the inability to explain what happened and why, lowering the threshold to war, a destabilizing arms race, and also our relationship to technology. So you can see there's a lot of concerns there. But what I think, for me personally, having worked on tech and society for the last 4 years, what I think is missing is a fundamental question. And that question is, do we even need to be creating, developing, and deploying this type of technology? And I think if we look at the history of warfare, which ties in nicely with what Shaf was speaking about colonialism, extraction, we need to ask ourselves, who do we think this tech is going to be used against? Who actually are we seeing it being used against? And also, what kind of world are we creating? And we can also look to the history of technology itself. For example, the role that IBM played in the Holocaust, directly supplying the Nazis with tech. And how many minutes do I have left? Sorry. 2. I just wanted to finish with, I think as individuals and as a community, I see some great things going on here today, but I think it's really, really important that we apply a critical lens when we talk about technology, and we also become more discerning, because whilst technology does bring benefits, it's one thing to say it brings negatives. We're seeing technology kill people. And so for those of you who work in tech firms, it is actually very uncomfortable. I completely understand it's very uncomfortable to ask, what role am I playing in this? And you can't ignore that as people who work in technological industries. I even had to do it in the human rights industry. I quit my job last year because my organization that works on automation in warfare would not talk about Gaza. So it's really incumbent upon us as Muslims to ask these questions of ourselves, like what role am I contributing to the world? And yeah, going back to the fundamental question, do we even need this technology to kill people? Because when we talk about biases, what does that mean in the context of technology killing people? So,